Hey, welcome to the Riverside. This is Avett's story about erosion. Life around the river is always changing. The riverbank I have grown up wandering around on is changing before my eyes, and I learned another big word from Whitaker today. You see, when I first came to live beside the river, we would come down to the river spot, and Jig and Mama would sit in hammocks, and Whitaker would lay right next to the edge of the riverbank. There was a big drop from the edge down into the river, so it would make Mama nervous if I hung out on the edge with Whitaker. She always called me back away from the edge. Jig would call Whitaker away from the edge and put him in a down near the hammocks, but Whitaker would inch his way closer to the edge. This happened so often, Jig started calling him Whitaker erosion whenever he got too close to the edge. He'd say things like, "Come, Whitaker erosion," or "Stay away from the edge, Whitaker erosion." I thought it was just a term of endearment because whenever Whitaker came, he would get petted and then lay down beneath the hammocks. So I've been hearing Jig call Whitaker this for years now, and I got used to it. Today, I found out what he meant by it because I noticed that the riverbank has changed a lot in 3 years. The edge of the riverbank Whitaker likes to get close to has always had a big drop-off where it's a wall of sand and then the river. But there was plenty of a grassy bank where I could explore and find frogs. This grassy bank was full of all kinds of plants, bugs, and tiny animals for me to check out. But I've noticed something lately. The sandy, steep drop-off is starting to replace the grassy slope that leads down to the river. I didn't notice it at first, but now that I am 3, I pay more attention to details, and my powers of observation have become much greater. Whitaker and I were sitting underneath the hammocks, and it occurred to me that the edge of the river is much closer to the trees where Jig and Mama hang their hammocks. I asked, "Whitaker, do you know why the riverbank edge is getting closer to the hammock trees?" "I kind of do, Pup, and I feel bad about it because I think I am partially to blame." "What do you mean?" "Well, you know how Jig has been calling me Whitaker erosion for years now?" "Yeah, I thought it was just a pet name for you," I told him. "Well, I was hanging out with some of the 5th graders on a field trip today, and they were talking about something called erosion. They were doing a project in which they were making observations about an area that was being worn away by wind and another that was being worn away by rain. And today, we were observing how Lake Michigan is causing erosion." Well, it made me start to think about what Jig has been saying for years when he told me to get away from the riverbank's edge. It all began to make sense. That he was telling me that I was making the riverbank change by sitting right on the edge. All those times he called me away from the edge, I thought he was just wanting to pet me and have me close. But he was really trying to keep me from wrecking the riverbank. I just like sitting next to the edge because I can watch the fish swim and I can let my legs hang over. I didn't realize that I was affecting the riverbank because had I known, there is no way I would have done it. But apparently, humans and animals are also causes of erosion. The kids were talking about how strong winds and rains account for most of the erosion. I thought it was fascinating, because they were saying that wind and rain can break rocks down or reshape them to make them smooth. Then they were also talking about how the flow of water can cause erosion. I've noticed that after the really strong rains, the water has seemed higher when we get to the river, and the edge seems to be getting closer to the trees, I told him. "That's why they say you can never stand in the same river twice, because it's always changing," Whitaker said. "Who are they?" I asked him. "The kids at school." he said before continuing. They took me with them on their field trip to Lake Michigan to see the erosion that was taking place because of the high water and winds that were coming across the lake. It made me think about the trips we made to Grammy's friend's house in Arcadia the last couple years, and how the house all of a sudden was gone one day. I have been going there since I was a little puppy myself, and we used to be able to climb down the steps to get to the lake, and Talon and I would run along the shore while Grammy and Jig hung out with Grammy's friends. Well, the dune started to move closer and closer to the house, and by the time you started coming with us, the steps were gone and the lake was right up to the edge of the dune. It was such a bummer because Talon and I used to have so much fun chasing the seagulls as we let the waves crash into our feet. Then, last year, the edge of the house was hanging over the edge of the dune on one trip, and it was gone the next time we went, Whitaker told me. I remember that, I said. I wondered where the house went. Well, on the 5th grade field trip, we were learning about how a lot of houses along the edge of Lake Michigan are having the same problem, and people are having to put giant rocks along the edge or break walls to stop the erosion from destroying more houses. It really got me thinking about how for all these years I liked to sit on the edge of the riverbank and look down into the water or simply feel the wind blow on my face. I never knew I was also part of the reason the riverbank was moving. I know I'm not the only cause of erosion, but I am trying to sit a little farther from the edge now that I do know. I guess I'll try to be more aware of where I wander along the bank too, I told him. Thanks for listening.